Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Visual Mind podcast. It's been a while since I recorded a podcast episode, and I decided to make things more simple again because when I first started the podcast, it was just about me sitting down and my hair was a mess and I looked a mess, but it didn't matter because it's a podcast and nobody can see me and I don't have to feel comfortable sitting in front of the camera. So that's how it all started until I decided to start posting the podcast on YouTube. And of course, on YouTube, people prefer to have some kind of visual and the video, so I decided to film myself recording the podcast, and that just made it a little bit too complicated for me. And I'm in no way blaming people for wanting to see me, which is fair on YouTube, but it's not supposed to be a YouTube video per se. It's supposed to be something that you can listen to while doing something else, a classical podcast, so to say. So if you're doing chores, doing the dishes, laundry, or just chilling in bed and don't want to watch something but listen to something, then that's my podcast and that's where I want it to go. So now that I finally have a little bit more energy and time again for it, I wanted to kind of return back to what it was when I initially started. And I don't know why it took me so long to realize that, but it was good that I took a little bit of a break from the podcast. And the reason why I did that, it was a conscious decision. It was not just me abandoning it in true ADHD fashion, but it was a conscious decision because I just had so much on my plate. I really wanted to focus more on my YouTube channel, on my main channel, and on my courses and creating and marketing those courses, finding a new platforms, or a lot of things have happened in the meantime. And now that I've done a lot of those things, I really felt like, hey, I actually want to sit down and record a podcast episode, but not in order to market anything or in order to make myself look like a good business person. I just want to talk about things and want to sit down, chill, get my thoughts out, and maybe even use this in some diary kind of fashion. One of my favorite podcasts is actually someone who is doing it like that. It's a fellow Austrian person, so the podcast is in German. And if you understand German, then you might know or want to check it out. It's called Buchingers Tagebuch, which basically means that it's his diary. And he's also an influencer. He's a comedian. He writes books. And I think that he's very interesting and funny. And I relate to him a lot. And I love his podcasts. And he just sits down and talks about his week and what happened in that week. And I find it thrilling because he's self-employed. He works a lot with social media. And he does a lot of the things that I do or want to do. And so I find it interesting to just listen, even though it's not a structured podcast at all. So I thought, why don't I do it like this? I started this podcast off with always having some kind of theme for it. And I always wanted to make sure, like a YouTube video essentially, how to do this and that. I wanted people to learn some specific skill in every episode. But that kind of takes away from the spontaneity. And as much as I love to listen to podcasts every now and then that solve a specific problem, I also really appreciate the ones that are less structured. So I don't know how many people will want to listen to this kind of podcast now. But honestly, if I do this, then I'm gonna do it my way. And I'm not really justifying myself. It may sound like that. I'm just really letting you in on my thoughts, which is, it can be part of the new structure here. And I also wanted just to chill and sit down. And I feel like I have grown a lot when it comes to speaking and recording myself talk, because in the beginning it was very, very forced and I just had to have somewhat of a game plan, even though I usually don't do scripts. But also with my YouTube videos, it felt forced a lot. And sometimes it still does when I have a specific tutorial. I am kind of turned on, like, how do you say that? I'm ready to explain the specific steps, and I have to really think about and wrap my head around how I communicate certain things because it has to make sense, you know. If it is a watercolor tutorial, I have to have some kind of step-by-step thing. So it does feel still a little bit forced and structured, but I have gotten a lot better at just talking and feeling more natural while doing it, and also doing that in English, because when I first started, that just did not feel natural to me, of course, because it's not my first language, but still I wanted to do YouTube in English. That being said, I recently started a German channel as well, so I'm gonna be doing some German voiceovers for some videos and just see where it leads me and where it goes and if it's worth my time or not. But I just wanted to try it out because I've always had this thought in my head, what if I did videos in German? Would I reach more people because it's more niche and there's less good content in German? Would that help? Would I reach new people who maybe aren't that good at speaking English and normally wouldn't watch my usual English videos? So I wanted to try that too. But when I first started my channel, it was pretty clear to me that I wanted to do it in English because in some way that felt more comfortable, because it isn't my first language. So the people around me, a lot of them who could judge my first videos, they couldn't really do that as much because they didn't understand what I was talking about. Like the older generation, my parents, grandparents, all those people, they just didn't understand what I was talking about. So there was a lot less pressure there. When I talked in English, it was almost like a secret kind of language. And while they understood some parts of it, they couldn't really make out everything that I was saying. And so they couldn't judge me as much for it. And in a way that felt more safe. And also because I watched so much content in English myself, was always fascinated by it and wanted to improve my English. It felt like there were so many good reasons to do it in English, basically. But still, when I first started, I had to learn it. I had to practice it, and it was really, really hard. But now I'm talking so much in English, also on a day-to-day basis. I'm on so many Zoom calls with people talking English. I'm in a community with other people with ADHD, and it's international. So we talk English together unless there's so many people in the room and all of them speak German. That's the only time when we switch to German, because there's a few people who are from Austria and Germany, and then we can talk German. But that's besides the point. Most of the time we speak English, and I have also outside of that a lot of Zoom calls where I speak English. So in conclusion, I've become much more comfortable talking like this, and it feels much more like me and like I actually have a personality in English. That might sound weird, but when you're speaking in another language, then you might not have as much personality in that language because you're not used to talking in that language. And when the only time you speak in that language is when you're holding a presentation or recording a voiceover, then you might have more of a formal relationship with yourself in that language. But then when you make friends and talk English, in my case, with them, then you start to develop actually a personality in English. So that's kind of what happened here. I'm going on a lot of tangents here, but that's kind of what I wanted to do here. And I feel like this episode could also be a good opportunity to kind of give a life update on what happened between the last episode and now, which is probably a lot, but then again, also not. I don't know how much actually changed in my day-to-day life, honestly, but it's been a while since I recorded the last episode. I think it's probably almost a year. And last time I was talking about my ADHD diagnosis and what it's like to be an artist with ADHD, have a business with ADHD, and about the diagnosis and getting a late diagnosis, and being in my mid-20s when I got the diagnosis, and all of those things. And since then, I've obviously really learned a lot more about how my brain works, about ADHD, and how to run a business with it, and all of the challenges. But let me tell you, just because I know a lot more about it doesn't mean I've overcome the challenges or that my ADHD is now some kind of superpower. There's always this disability versus superpower debate, because some people say that it is a superpower and other people say it is a disability. And to be honest, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. But I do think it is very important to acknowledge that it is a disability, because it just is. There are things that my ADHD makes so hard for me to do. And it's also not a shame to have a disability. We have so much internalized ableism to the point where acknowledging that you have a disability feels like somewhat admitting defeat, or like you're worth less as a person. But that's just not true. If you think about someone maybe in a wheelchair or another disability that is visible, would you think that a person sitting in a wheelchair, that they're fundamentally worth less than someone who can walk? Would you expect them to be getting up and walking? I don't know, but with mental disabilities or mental health issues in general, people expect you to kind of overcome it and to figure out ways around it or whatever, to find life hacks, how to hack your ADHD symptoms and things like that. And it can get to a point where it's toxic, and that's very relevant for right now, because How to ADHD, if you know that channel, it's probably the biggest channel about ADHD. She posted a video about exactly this topic, about how you're still worthy and valid with your struggles, and the point shouldn't be to overcome the struggles in order to be worthy as a person. And I think that's very, very valid. So I've also kind of come to this conclusion that it is important to acknowledge where you are at and to be okay with the status quo. I'm inherently a messy person. That's what I am and who I am. And I can do identity work as much as I want around that and start to try to identify as a person who is tidy and neat. But it's just not in my nature as much as I try. And it just makes me feel like shit, essentially, if I try to be neat and tidy. So I hired a cleaning lady, and it solves my issues. I had to overcome some mental hurdles in order to do that, because at first it felt like I was failing, especially since I've been socialized as a woman. It feels like you should do all of your household chores yourself, but then again, why? I started to question that. And now I pay her. She cleans the entire apartment in 3 hours. Everything's squeaky clean after that. I feel amazing. And I didn't have to clean. And yeah, isn't that awesome? So I don't have to overcome all of my struggles to be worthy. I can also ask for help and support. And now I am in the privileged position where I can afford the cleaning lady. I mean, I'd be willing to cut back on other things in order to afford her. I think if I count together all that I'm paying her throughout the year, I could go on an extra vacation from that money. But honestly, I would rather have a clean apartment and not have to worry about it, not have to clean the floors ever again. That is just absolutely amazing. So I have come to the acceptance. I am a messy person, and getting some help in that regard is good. So my next step would be to think about hiring an assistant who can do administrative tasks. So that's somewhere in the future and somewhere that I really want to go, because that would help me a lot. Because the hardest thing about my business, honestly, is replying to emails and doing all of the administrative tasks. And this is just so hard for me. Even though it doesn't take that much time, it takes so much mental capacity, especially with my ADHD brain. So the thought of getting rid of those tasks for myself, that would be amazing. And I just want to focus on the creative side of my business. So those are the things that have been going on in my head. And I've also discovered something that's absolutely invaluable. The most life-changing thing I have discovered for my ADHD is something called body doubling. So what that basically means is that you're not alone doing something. There's at least one other person there who does something as well. They don't have to do the exact same thing. So sometimes I will just sit down and paint while my girlfriend also sits in the same office and does something else, sitting on the chair and just chilling, and I'm there, and the painting is so much easier because I'm not alone and there's someone else holding me accountable, and that way my brain has a much easier time focusing. So I have joined a membership for people with ADHD, and we have almost like co-working sessions where you sit down and you have some kind of goal and you work on it. And if you don't reach it, that's okay. You can get support. And if you reach it, no matter how tiny the goal was, if the goal was to brush your hair, you will be celebrated if you reach it. And that's just so amazing. And it has been so healing and so awesome to just see people in their messy apartments struggling to do their taxes, and it just normalizes all of the things that I do. And there are a few people on there who are also business owners, and seeing them doing their stuff and then also being there and doing my stuff, that it's just so worthy. So that's where I've been at. And of course, my ADHD, ever since my diagnosis, has been one of the top things on my mind, because I want to learn how to deal with it. And I just can't turn it off, whether I want to or not. It's always going to be on the forefront of my mind. It's always going to be something important, whether I want that to be the case or not. And I've realized that like 90% of my struggles come from my ADHD. It's not just me failing as a person or being weird. Like, I just have ADHD, and so many other people have the same things. I have sensory issues, I stim, I have a hard time focusing, processing, I zone out, I get up, like all of the things. There's so many things that I didn't know were ADHD, like the fact that I'm incredibly clumsy. That's also ADHD. I really injured my hand because I ran against the wall. And then like a week later, I injured my other hand because I ran against a shelf. So things like that happen. And as much as it sucks, it really helps to have a community and someone to talk to about it, and someone who can relate. So I've also been trying to build an identity outside of my business, and I think I've done an amazing job at that, because I do have hobbies now. Isn't that amazing? I didn't have hobbies for the longest time. My business was my hobby. Painting, being creative, making videos, all of that was my hobby, which is fine and good until it turned into my job. And then it wasn't really a hobby anymore. And when you spend your day painting for your business, you don't really want to end your day with more painting. At least that's not me. So I have been working on developing hobbies, and I've been going to Taekwondo twice a week and learning how to kick people in the face or in the butt or wherever I can kick them. That has been so fun. I really enjoy Taekwondo, and I have been exercising quite a bit. I joined the gym. I started to go running, signed up for a 10K in October, so I'm training for that. And yeah, so I've done that. I've also been playing a lot of Sims 4, which is it's slowly but surely turning into my special interest. I love learning about it. I watch YouTube videos about it, and I build houses and play my family legacy thing on Sims. And it's just amazing to allow myself to actually do that and spend all the time doing that, because it is also creative. I really love building houses in The Sims, and I love interior design. And so this comes very natural to me. And I also have been enjoying plants for a while. And now that it's spring again, I am finding myself more interested in indoor and outdoor plants again. I have a tiny garden on the balcony. And so, in conclusion, I have tried to turn more into a well rounded person and allow myself to actually have hobbies outside of my business and have an identity outside of it as well, and not just focus on my business. And in turn, that gives me energy to have more focus in my business, because since I let myself do so many things on the side with no pressure, I can really use my energy and my focus in my business to actually do the same thing over and over again in my business, which in the past was really hard. I was hopping from one thing to the next. I was trying so many things, which is peak ADHD. And I had an online shop for the longest time. I tried crowdfunding. I tried so many income streams and avenues. And now I've kind of settled on courses, and I really want to stick with the courses and do a sponsorship here and there on my main YouTube channel. And so this is where I'm at now. I've focused a lot on gouache lately, and I still love gouache, which is very surprising, to be honest. I mean, now that I'm done launching my gouache course, I am allowing myself to paint with watercolors again, which I haven't done for the longest time. So that's fun and interesting as well. But I still find myself having an easier time focusing in my business because I have so many things outside of it where I can also do my stuff. And when I say it like that, it sounds like I really have my shit together and like my life is working out really great. So that's good, because I kind of need that. Like, I'm a person who's exercising and doing stuff. There's still areas where I really struggle and have to work on. And on a day-to-day basis, I struggle a lot. I get paralyzed and get stuck for 2 hours on the floor where I can't move and can't do anything, and my brain doesn't let me get up. So there's struggles that I wish I didn't have, and I'm still trying to get meds for my ADHD, which has been a pretty long journey, and I still have to take 2 more appointments to hopefully get there and hopefully get meds. And maybe that's gonna help me with my struggles. But overall, I mean, I have a lot of things going for me, a lot of things going well, and I'm really proud of what I accomplished, actually. And I think just talking about all of this actually helps. So kind of already achieved my mission with this podcast episode. And I really hope that it can also help some of you, maybe inspire some of you, whether you do or don't have ADHD or anything else that might be in your way or holding you back. Whether you want to build an art business or not, or you just listen to this to pass the time, I really hope that you got something out of this, and I hope that the next episode will not be in a year, but sooner than that. And yeah, with all of that being said, if you are listening to this on YouTube, then subscribe to the podcast YouTube channel. If you listen on any other avenue, then make sure you leave a positive review and follow and whatever you do to podcasts. And I will hopefully see you next time. Goodbye.